You've been taught that controlling your emotions is a sign of strength, that biting your tongue when you're furious, smiling when you're on the verge of tears, or pretending everything's fine while something inside you is screaming means you're mature, emotionally intelligent, above it. Maybe you've even been praised for it, told you're so calm, so stable, so resilient. But what if I told you that this control you're so proud of is actually destroying you from the inside? What if I told you that the very emotions you bury, the ones you're convinced you've conquered, are quietly growing stronger, more twisted, more dangerous? Carl Jung, one of the most influential minds in the history of psychology, spent decades observing this pattern in his patients and in himself. And what he discovered is terrifying in its simplicity. What you repress doesn't disappear. It descends into the unconscious, into what Jung called the shadow. And in the shadow, it grows teeth. That rage you were too good to feel. It doesn't vanish. It waits. It festers. Until one day, it explodes at the wrong person, at the wrong time, and you stand there stunned, saying the words we've all said. I don't know what came over me. That jealousy you buried because it made you feel small and petty, it doesn't die. It turns into resentment, into sabotage, into chronic dissatisfaction that poisons your relationships. That grief you swallowed because crying is weakness, it settles in your body like lead. It turns into fatigue, numbness, depression. You walk through life functional, but dead inside. You see, most people think repression is the same as self-control. But Jung shattered that illusion. He revealed the brutal paradox. The more you try to destroy a part of yourself, the more power it gains over you. The more you push an emotion out of your conscious mind, the more deeply it takes root in your unconscious. And from there, it begins to run your life. And the worst part, you don't even know it's happening. You think you're choosing your actions, your career, your partner, your habits. But in reality, you're being driven by unintegrated, unconscious parts of your psyche that you've spent your whole life trying to deny. Jung called these hidden forces complexes. And once they gain enough energy, they hijack your behavior. You lash out, you implode, you withdraw, you destroy the very things you love, and you don't know why. But there is a reason. In this video, we're going to expose it. We're going to dive into the psychological mechanisms that cause repressed emotions to mutate and return, stronger, darker, and more destructive than ever. We'll explore Jung's concept of the shadow and how the very emotions you consider unacceptable are often the key to your wholeness. We'll look at how our culture rewards repression, how you've internalized these moral judgments, and what it really takes to break the cycle. Because here's the truth no one wants to admit. You're not just light. You're not just kindness, compassion, calm. You are also rage, lust, envy, power, grief, terror. And the more you deny that, the more you become a slave to it. This isn't about indulging your darkest impulses. It's about something far more radical and far more liberating: integration. So if you've ever felt like something inside you is trying to break free, like there's a war going on between who you are and who you think you should be, you're exactly where you need to be. From a young age, you were taught the rules of emotional decency. Don't raise your voice. Don't show anger. Don't cry in public. Don't admit jealousy. Don't express desire too openly. And for God's sake, don't let anyone see how much you're actually hurting. You were rewarded for staying composed, punished, subtly or not, for showing too much. Over time, you learned that certain emotions are bad, certain impulses are immature, and slowly, without even realizing it, you built a psychological mask, one that looks like strength, one that looks like control, but behind it, boiling chaos. This is the tragedy of emotional repression. It disguises itself as a virtue. You think you're being good, noble, spiritual even. You bite back your anger because you're not that kind of person. You fake a smile because you don't want to bring others down. You minimize your sadness with shallow positivity because others have it worse. You call it maturity, discipline, growth. But Jung saw something very different. He saw that this kind of repression doesn't elevate you. It fragments you. Because when you split yourself in two, when you show the world your acceptable side and exile the rest into the dark, you don't become more evolved, you become less whole. And a fragmented psyche is not a peaceful one. It is filled with conflict, inner tension, and eventual collapse. Modern society reinforces this split at every level. We live in a culture obsessed with image and self-presentation. On social media, you're expected to project happiness, gratitude, balance. In workplaces, emotional neutrality is rewarded. In relationships, we're told not to be too much, too angry, too sensitive, too intense. So we adapt. We internalize these rules. We turn against our own emotions. We become self-censors, emotional traitors, smiling assassins of our inner truth. And here's the terrifying irony. The more you reject a part of yourself, the more powerful it becomes. Not because it's evil, but because energy that is denied cannot simply disappear. It must go somewhere. So it goes underground into the unconscious, into the shadow. And once it's there, it doesn't just wait patiently. It plots, it builds, it finds backdoors into your behavior. It leaks out as sarcasm, passive aggression, self-sabotage, addiction, fatigue, numbness, explosive overreactions, or inexplicable despair. You think you're holding it all together, but your unconscious knows better, and it's far less polite than you. Jung warned that repression is not the same as transformation. Just because you're not expressing an emotion doesn't mean you've processed it. Just because you're not acting on an impulse doesn't mean it has lost its grip on you. Suppression is not healing, it's delay. And delayed pain returns with interest. You may think you're being strong by not feeling your feelings, but in truth, you're feeding a psychological time bomb. And the more you repress, the less control you truly have. This is not strength. This is fear masquerading as virtue. And until you see that clearly, you will remain at the mercy of everything you pretend not to feel. So the question is, where does all of this go? When you suppress anger, grief, lust, envy, shame, where do they go? What happens to these rejected parts of your psyche? To answer that, we must enter the place where all of your disowned emotions are sent. In the next section, we descend into the shadow. If this content is making sense to you, click the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your support. There is a place within you that you pretend doesn't exist. A dark, internal vault where you've exiled every thought, every feeling, every impulse that you, or the world, has deemed unacceptable. You never speak of it. You rarely even think of it, but it's always there, watching, waiting. Carl Jung gave this place a name, the shadow. The shadow is not some abstract metaphor. It is a real psychological structure within your unconscious mind. It is composed of everything you have rejected, denied, suppressed, or disowned in yourself. All the parts of you that didn't fit the image you were trying to build. The rage you weren't allowed to express. The jealousy you felt ashamed of. The desire for control that made you feel like a bad person. The sexual impulses you labeled perverted. The grief that made you feel weak. The ambition that felt selfish. It's all there, in the dark. And here's the truth Jung made painfully clear. What lives in the shadow does not stay quiet forever. You may not hear it. You may not see it. But you can feel it. In the way you snap at someone you love and instantly regret it. In the way you sabotage your own success right before a breakthrough. In the way you chase toxic relationships, repeat painful patterns, or numb yourself just to survive another day. These aren't random behaviors. These are symptoms of a shadow that's overflowing. A shadow that has been ignored for so long, it has started to act on its own. Jung discovered that the unconscious is not passive, it is alive. The contents of the shadow form what he called complexes, autonomous psychic clusters that operate independently from your conscious will. They hijack your emotions. They distort your perception. They make you say things you swore you'd never say. They make you hurt people you love. And they always come with the same feeling. That wasn't me. But it was. It was the part of you that you refuse to acknowledge. And the more you ignore it, the more power it gains. This is the paradox. Your attempts to be a good person are often what create your darkest behaviors. Because instead of facing your impulses directly, examining them, understanding them, integrating them, you deny their existence. You bury them. But what you bury doesn't die. It evolves. It becomes distorted. And it returns in ways you cannot control. You don't just have a shadow. You are being shaped by it. Every day, every time you overreact, every time you say, "I don't know what's wrong with me," every time you make the same mistake and swear you won't do it again. That's not a lack of discipline. That's a complex taking over. And the more you identify with a false image of yourself, the more convinced you are that you are only kind, calm, humble, or good, the more blind you become to what lives underneath. Jung wrote that the shadow is 90% pure gold, because inside those disowned parts of you is massive psychological energy, energy that could be used creatively, consciously, powerfully, if only it were brought into the light. But most people never do that. They live in a state of inner division, split, fragmented, tormented by emotions they don't understand, controlled by compulsions they can't stop. They keep polishing the mask while the shadow rages beneath. And one day, it breaks through. The meltdown, the affair, the addiction, the collapse. And it didn't come out of nowhere. It came from everything you refused to face. So how do you take back control? You don't conquer the shadow by fighting it. You conquer it by integrating it. In the next section, we'll explore the brutal paradox of emotional control and why admitting your darkest feelings may be the most powerful act of self-mastery you will ever commit. You've spent years, maybe decades, trying to control yourself, trying to manage your reactions, regulate your emotions, contain your darkness. You've worked hard to stay calm, to be composed, to not let things get to you. And you probably believe that's a good thing. That self-control equals mastery. That the less you feel, the more in control you are. But what if I told you that's a lie? What if I told you that the version of control you've been chasing is not control at all, but a slow, silent surrender to the unconscious forces you refuse to face? This is the devastating paradox Jung uncovered. The more you repress a part of yourself, the less power you actually have over it. You think you're eliminating the problem by pushing it down, but what you're really doing is giving it permission to grow unchecked, outside of your awareness, outside of your choice. Imagine this. You tell yourself you're not angry. You don't do anger. You're a peaceful person. You've outgrown that primitive reaction, but the anger doesn't vanish. It finds other roots. You snap at your partner over something trivial. You passive-aggressively undermine your co-worker. You have unexplained neck pain or a migraine that knocks you out. Why? Because the part of you that feels violated or ignored or betrayed wasn't acknowledged, and it had to go somewhere. And you still think you're in control. You're not. You're a puppet to the emotions you pretend not to feel. Repression is not mastery. It is avoidance. And avoidance is not strength. It is fear, dressed in spiritual or moral costume. Jung made this distinction clear. Self-mastery is not about suppression. It's about conscious relationship. It's about saying, yes, I feel this. Yes, I'm capable of this. Yes, this lives in me. And from that place of raw, honest awareness, choosing how to respond. That's real power. That's real control. The person who says, yes, I feel rage, and I know what it wants, is infinitely more in command than the person who says, me, angry, never. Because the first has a relationship with their shadow. The second is possessed by it. We live in a world that idolizes positivity, calmness, serenity. You're told to stay high vibe, to just let it go, to rise above. But Jung saw that this spiritual bypassing is one of the most dangerous psychological traps of all. It turns you into an actor, smiling while seething, forgiving while resenting, preaching peace while dying inside. Eventually, that mask cracks. And the longer you've worn it, the more catastrophic the collapse. So what's the alternative? Radical honesty, owning your contradictions, holding space for your pain without sugarcoating it, admitting the part of you that hates, that envies, that wants to dominate. Not to indulge it, not to become it, but to understand it, to include it in the full picture of who you are. Because here's the brutal truth. You are not just a light being. You are not just kind, noble, or evolved. You are also primal, messy, contradictory, capable of harm. And until you admit that, you are not whole. You are just pretending. And there is no peace in pretense. If you want real control, you must stop denying who you are. You must stop splitting yourself into acceptable and unacceptable. You must embrace the full spectrum of your humanity and learn to work with it, not against it. But how do you do that? How do you integrate what you've spent your whole life rejecting? That's what we'll explore next, the path of conscious integration and the practices Jung offered to reclaim the parts of you that live in shadow. You cannot heal what you will not face. You cannot transform what you refuse to name. And you will never become whole while clinging to only the pieces of yourself that feel safe, pretty, and socially acceptable. Carl Jung was clear. The goal of psychological development is not to become good. It is to become whole. Wholeness means inclusion. It means reclaiming everything you've exiled to the unconscious. Not to act on every impulse, not to justify destructive behavior, but to recognize that these forces exist within you and to build a conscious relationship with them. This is the path of integration, and it is not easy. Integration demands that you stop pretending, that you look in the mirror and see not just the persona, the polished mask you show to the world, but also the shadow that lurks behind it. It requires brutal honesty, deep courage, and the willingness to feel what you've been numbing for years. But here's the secret Jung revealed. When you bring the unconscious into consciousness, it loses its power to control you. So, how do you do this? Let's start with the first step, awareness through projection. Jung taught that we often project our own disowned traits onto others. What you most hate, judge, or obsess over in others often reflects what you're unwilling to see in yourself. Can't stand selfish people? Ask yourself where you've been denying your own needs. Enraged by arrogance? Explore where you've repressed your own confidence. The shadow shows up in the people who trigger you most, not because they are evil, but because they mirror your own blind spots. Next, active imagination. This is not woo-woo fantasy. It's a psychological method Jung developed to interact directly with the unconscious. You sit with an emotion, a rage, a fear, a desire, and you give it a voice. You imagine it as a character, a figure, a presence. And then you dialogue with it. You ask, why are you here? What do you want from me? You listen, not with judgment, but with curiosity. What emerges from this process often shocks people. Insights that bypass logic, messages from parts of the psyche that have been silenced for years. Then, symbolic expression. Repressed emotions carry intense psychic energy. If you don't give that energy a conscious outlet, it will find unconscious ones through addiction, sabotage, illness. So Jung advised symbolic release. Write a letter filled with everything you want to scream, then burn it. Paint your rage, dance your grief, scream into a pillow. The key is to express the energy without destroying your life or relationships. The goal is not to suppress or explode, but to transmute. Integration also demands that you hold paradox. You are capable of love and hate, gentleness and fury, compassion and jealousy. Trying to eliminate one side only creates fragmentation. True maturity is being able to sit with both poles without rushing to fix, resolve, or pretend. Jung called this holding the tension of opposites. And through that tension, a third thing emerges, a deeper layer of self. And finally, Jung emphasized the importance of ritual confession, not to a priest, not to a therapist, but to yourself, privately, regularly, in a journal, in a mirror, in a whisper. Admit the feelings you hide from everyone else, the ones you're ashamed of, the ones that make you feel unlovable. This simple act prevents the buildup of psychic pressure and keeps the shadow from growing too powerful. Understand, integration is not a one-time event. It is a lifelong process, and it is not about perfection. It is about presence, awareness, relationship. You don't need to become flawless. You need to become aware of your flaws and hold them with dignity, not denial. This is how you reclaim your power. This is how you stop being a puppet of your unconscious. But here's the thing. Most people have no idea when their shadow is active. They don't know the signs. They don't recognize the patterns. They mistake possession for personality. In the next section, we'll expose the hidden symptoms of repressed emotion and how to know when your shadow is running the show. If what you're hearing resonates with you, you'll find real value in my ebooks. Beyond the Shadow breaks down Jung's core ideas, while Dialogues with the Unconscious gives you a 30-day path to apply them in your life. Both are linked in the pinned comment. The shadow doesn't announce itself. It doesn't knock on your door and say, "Hey, I'm here to ruin your life." No, it's far more cunning than that. It hides behind the mask you wear every day. It whispers through your tone of voice, slips through your body language, and seeps into the choices you make when no one is watching. And unless you've developed the capacity to see it, you'll spend your life being controlled by parts of yourself you don't even know exist. So how do you know when your shadow is in control? You know it in the aftermath, in the broken relationships, in the moments you regret, in the patterns that repeat over and over like a curse you can't break. Jung believed that shadow possession was not rare, it was the norm, and it shows up in ways most people never associate with repression. Let's make it clear. If you find yourself overreacting, snapping in rage over a small inconvenience, dissolving into tears that feel out of proportion, cutting someone off for something they didn't even know they did, this is not just you being emotional. This is likely a complex, a shadow force that's been activated. You are no longer responding as your conscious self. You are being possessed by a part of you that was exiled long ago. If you sabotage opportunities right before success, if you procrastinate on the things that matter most, if you get close to someone and then suddenly push them away, these are not just bad habits. They are signs of internal opposition. There is a part of you that does not believe you deserve success, connection, or joy. And until that part is brought to light, it will continue to block you. You know the shadow is in control when you feel like you're stuck in a loop. Dating the same kind of partner, ending up in the same fights, watching your life become a series of familiar disappointments. You change jobs, cities, partners, diets, but nothing fundamentally changes. Why? Because you're trying to fix your outer world while ignoring the inner war that drives it all. You also see the shadow in perfectionism, in compulsive people-pleasing, in the desperate need to be seen as good, kind, loving. These behaviors seem virtuous, but often they are defenses, built to suppress the rage, selfishness, or bitterness you've never allowed yourself to feel. You smile, but it's brittle. You give, but resent it. You serve, but feel hollow. Why? Because the shadow is alive and starving. And then there are the physical signs. Yes, your body talks. Chronic fatigue, migraines, anxiety, digestive issues, even autoimmune flare-ups. These can all be manifestations of emotional energy that has no outlet. Jung understood this long before psychosomatic medicine became mainstream. What the psyche cannot process consciously, the body will express unconsciously. Nightmares, recurring dreams, shadow figures, being chased, attacked, humiliated. These are not just random images. Your unconscious is trying to deliver a message you've refused to receive. Jung viewed dreams as the royal road to the unconscious, raw transmissions from the parts of you you've abandoned. If you're not paying attention, you're missing the map that could save you. Let's be clear, everyone has a shadow, and everyone is vulnerable to possession. The question is not if it happens. The question is, will you recognize it when it does? Because if you don't, you'll blame the world. You'll think the problem is your job, your partner, your childhood, your bad luck. But the truth is brutal. The common denominator in all of your suffering is you. Not because you're broken, but because you are unconscious. But here's the good news. Awareness is curative. When you start to recognize these signs, not with shame, but with fierce compassion, you reclaim your ability to choose. You create space between impulse and action. You stop being dragged by your shadow and start relating to it. And that's when real transformation begins. But what about the ultimate source of these messages, the dreams, the symbols, the language of the unconscious? In the next section, we'll explore how Jung used dreams as portals to the repressed self, and how you can begin decoding the cryptic messages your psyche is already sending you. You were never meant to be perfect. You were never meant to be pure. You were never meant to be only good, only kind, only calm, only positive. That image, the flawless, enlightened, always in control version of you, it's a fantasy. And worse, it's a prison. A prison you've built out of shame, fear, and the desperate hope that if you just hide your darkness well enough, you'll finally be worthy of love. But the truth is much harder and much more liberating. You are not just light. You are not just the parts of you that people approve of. You are rage. You are lust. You are envy. You are cruelty. You are the capacity to betray, to manipulate, to destroy. And the moment you admit that, not intellectually but viscerally, you will feel something shift. You will feel a wave of truth crashing through your carefully constructed identity. You will feel something sacred return to your body, power. Because the things you've tried to cut out of yourself are not evil. They are energy, raw, psychic energy. And when you repress them, you weaken your very soul. You become fragmented, disconnected, controlled by what you will not claim. Carl Jung did not teach us to become angels. He taught us to become whole. And wholeness includes contradiction. It includes paradox. It includes the shadow. This is the brutal beauty of Jung's work. It confronts you with everything you've tried to avoid, but not to punish you, to liberate you. Because when you stop wasting your life pretending, you get access to your full psychological inheritance. You stop fearing your emotions. You stop projecting your darkness onto others. You stop reacting blindly. And for the first time, you start to choose. You don't need to be ruled by your impulses, but you do need to acknowledge them. You don't need to act on every feeling, but you do need to feel them. You don't need to collapse into your shadow, but you do need to meet it, understand it, and integrate it so that it becomes your ally, not your enemy. That's the real meaning of psychological freedom. It's not peace through denial. It's peace through relationship, through dialogue, through wholeness. Because what you repress controls you, but what you integrate empowers you. So I leave you with this question. What part of yourself are you still afraid to face? Leave a comment. Speak your truth. What emotions have you buried? What impulses have you judged? Because the act of admitting it is the beginning of transformation. And this journey isn't over. If this video struck something deep inside you, keep going, keep watching. You'll understand why when you see it, and I'll see you there.